It has been my great privilege to enjoy the friendship and working relationships with the leadership of the Los Angeles Islamic Center, Doctors Maher and Hassan Hattout, Doctors Omar and Zizi Alfi, Salam and Dr. Laila Al-Mariati have instructed and inspired me by their commitment to community and to the principles of faith and justice. We share that same commitment. And because of that commitment, we have organized a new peace and justice ministry at All Saints Church, Sustainable World. And I am here to share our story and our aspirations with you. We seek to promote and support a socially responsible local and world economy that values life, Earth's resources, spiritual community through personal choices, education, and public action. Sustainable World Ministry began with a conversation between two people, longtime peace and justice activists, about a groundbreaking economic, social, and political analysis by David Korten, whose experience working with USAID and the Ford Foundation opened his eyes to the connection between growing world poverty, unfettered power of transnational corporations, and U.S. free trade policies, issues that had long troubled us as activists. We devoured his new book, When Corporations Rule the World. Soon there were book study groups forming, and after that a second Korten book was published, The Post-Corporate World. The enthusiasm and leadership that emerged from these core reading groups gave rise to the Positive Futures Gathering at All Saints Church last April. This 3-day conference brought 400 Southern Californians together to examine the nature of our suicide economy and to look for ways of transforming it for a sustainable future. David Korten gave us a prophetic call to challenge corporate rule and to work for an alternative partnership model based on cooperation and caring. On that day, we joined the growing international protest and reform movement, the World Social Forum, who gathered just this last January, 100,000 strong in Porto Alegre, Brazil. We are convinced, as are millions around the world, that people are not as enamored with materialism, consumerism, and greed as the mega corporations would have us believe. People of faith especially are saying, this world isn't working, but what can we do about it? Many Americans are outraged at how too frequently big business takes advantage of people and the environment around the globe, but they assume they are alone or out of touch with the real world. Multinational businesses, which run most of our news media sources, would also like us to believe there is no alternative. Winners and losers are just the cost of the way we do business. That is why we turn to the sources of our faith in order to resist the temptation to acquiesce to this dominant theme that there is no other alternative. We believe the human family, and indeed all of creation, are at an historic crossroad of life or death, that we must transform our way of being and develop the capacity to be a more benign presence in this world. There are a zillion other alternatives to our current behavior. Another world is most definitely possible. The current crisis that we are experiencing at this very moment is certainly a wake-up call to the truth that we are the ones we've been waiting for. We have too long waited in vain for the arrival of an heroic leader equal to the challenge of the current human predicament. But leadership must come from the bottom, from each and every one of us. Any of you who have ever put your hand to the tiller of any kind of a boat know the primary rule of sailing. You are responsible for your own wake. As privileged members of the world's most powerful economy, we must take seriously our responsibility within the global economic system to make careful decisions as to what we buy and consider how our purchases affect people in other countries. Now, this is a hard sell in upscale, middle-class America. The topic of economics is exceedingly difficult to talk about in most first-world churches, more taboo than politics or sex. Yet no aspect of our individual and corporate lives is more determinative of our welfare, and few subjects are more frequently addressed in our scriptures. The standard of economic and social justice is woven into the warp and welt of the Bible. It is foolish and superficial, says Wendell Berry, the farmer, philosopher, and writer, to think that we could correct what is wrong merely by tinkering with the institutional machinery. The changes that are required are fundamental changes in the way we are living. So when we sustainables reflected together about what we wanted to accomplish and what our goals might be, we started with ourselves. And I'll share our goals with you. First, to examine our own ways of living, the choices we make, primarily the things we buy and how we invest, and their effect on the rest of the world, on labor justice and the environment. Second, to educate ourselves and our community in the religious and social imperatives for global economic justice by offering a variety of immersion education experiences in marginalized areas to see with our own eyes the effects of first world behavior and policies. For example, over 30 of our colleagues have visited maquiladoras along the border of Mexico and Arizona, talking with the workers, with migrant families, with Border Patrol, with nonprofit groups who advocate for the migrants. Several of us have just returned from an immersion experience in Guatemala, where we worked on our third goal, which is to study the effects of the pending Free Trade Agreement, FTAA, and the unrestrained power of transnational corporations in the U.S. policies, to study the effects on democracy, on human rights, on indigenous survival, economic equity, labor justice, war and peace, and the stewardship of creation. And it was all right there in living color in Guatemala, and I dare say throughout Central America. One of our own members has traveled to Porto Alegre to join the 100,000 at the World Social Forum last January. Our fourth goal is to support the Living Wage campaign and sweatshop reform right here in Los Angeles. Fifth, we advocate for regional, local economies and we support locally community-based business. We support maximizing local control of resources, especially food security, and minimizing absentee ownership, which is much of our critique and opposition to the expansion of NAFTA to South and Central America. Sixth, we promote fair trade, the sale of fair trade products that provide workers with a living wage. Fair trade is the International Living Wage campaign. Finally, we partner and network with local and national organizations, joining the international movement advocating a people-centered and living economy.